You have no enemies. No one does. One of the most iconic lines in anime, and I know what you're thinking. Well, that's a nice idea and all, but I clearly have enemies. However, I took this in a very different way to what you're expecting, and if I'd done so earlier, it would have saved me a lot of regret. But a quote baffled me at first. How could people not have enemies? Thors himself had countless thousands of people that would have gladly taken his head given the chance, so how could he possibly say something like that? What could this man, a man so great that even these ruthless, mercenary Vikings felt such guilt at killing him, what could he see that I couldn't? Well, it turns out, a lot. The recurring theme throughout Vinland is the idea that everyone is a slave to something. In episode 8 we see Thorfinn talking to a slave and he looks down on her claiming that he's nothing like her and he's baffled why she doesn't just run away. To which she responds, "You and me are the same." And she's completely correct. Thorfinn is a slave to vengeance. He'd never admit it, but if you can't walk away from something, you're a slave to it. Thorfinn could run away from his quest for vengeance at any time. He could go back to Iceland, put everything behind him, start a family and live a happy, peaceful life. But he doesn't. Why? We even see from this one scene in episode 11 that Thorfinn knows Thors wouldn't want this, but he's acting the way he is because he doesn't know how to handle what he's feeling, which is completely understandable from a kid his age going through what he has, especially with no one to guide him. But as years and years pass, he still doesn't stop. He's miserable, he's humiliated and he's alone, but he still doesn't stop. He's killed more people than he can count, and that is the last thing Thors would have wanted, so why does he still not stop? In part it's because he's convinced himself that he can't be happy or begin to live until he's done so, which is something we all do and is very dangerous, because as long as you keep saying, "I'll be happy once this happens," there's that implication that you can't be until it does, and it may never happen. But it's honestly so much simpler than that. As I'm sure you know, it's just not always that easy to let things go. I recently went through this myself, and whilst I hope none of you can relate to Thorfinn's exact situation, we've all experienced something that makes us want revenge, to get back at those who have wronged us. And there's nothing wrong with having that anger. It's a completely natural response, don't let my earlier comment about being a slave make you feel ashamed about it. But there's a right and a wrong way to go about handling it. Thorfinn channeled all his anger into revenge. He spent a decade chasing it, and in the end it was taken away from him, but suppose he had got it, suppose he managed to kill Askeladd. Do you really think that would have made him feel any better? Sure, that would have been the beginning of him moving on, but did he have to go through all those years of misery to begin to move on? Could he not have just started at any time by simply leaving this situation behind him? Instead, he became someone he hated and regretted being, and that is the worst feeling in the world. So what should he have done instead? I can very much relate to the feeling of, I can't just let them get away with what they've done, but unless you have no choice, which is a point I'll come back to, unless you have no choice, I don't recommend it at all. And this is what I believe Thors was trying to say. From the moment we first meet this man, he both inspires and confuses us and the other characters. He trades all the village's sheep, an unimaginably vital resource in the desolate land they're in, for a man who's basically dead already. He's the only man who doesn't seem excited at the prospect of battle, and he says some very confusing things such as, he's weak because he needs the sword, or of course, you have no enemies. Here's what I think he meant by that. You might be their enemy, but unless you absolutely have to, don't make them your enemy. In the fight leading up to Thor's death, he doesn't kill a single one of the attackers, and this really confuses everyone there, but he didn't need to. In all his wisdom he could tell Askeladd was honourable enough to stick to his promise, and he had enough faith in himself to be able to win against him. Of course, as I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, there are times where you do need to fight back against people. And I don't mean physically, although of course those very rare situations can exist, but it's essential to just stand up for yourself sometimes. Thors couldn't just stand there and do nothing, he even gives Thorfinn a knife so that, if necessary, he can protect himself. And we actually see how reluctant Thors is to even do that, because he can tell Thorfinn hasn't learned what he's trying to teach him yet, that it should only be used when someone is a threat and you don't have a choice. However, following the events of this episode, what threat was Askeladd to Thorfinn or the rest of the village? None. He had no reason to ever go there, and I think Given his respect for Thors, he likely would have been reluctant to, even if someone did pay him. As incredibly frustrating as it would have been for Thorfinn to simply return home and allow Asgard to get away with it, what benefit is it to anyone for Thorfinn to do what he did? Or even if he managed to kill him? If instead he went home, learned how to take over his father's role in the village, of course he would still have to grieve. He would still be angry at times. But wouldn't he and everyone else be so much happier that way, compared to him spending a decade fueling his internal negative thoughts, preventing himself from moving on? The only person who wanted Thorfinn to do what he did was Thorfinn. And that's why I think there's one last part to this quote, and that's, don't be your own enemy. Thorfinn chasing after revenge the way he did, all it really was his choice in how to handle his feelings the way he did. And in doing so became his own worst enemy because it led him down such a miserable, regretful path. In the same way you can act to make other people feel worse, you can do the same with yourself. Thorfinn spending a decade obsessing over getting revenge for his father, not acting in a way that allowed him to move past what happened and live a good life, instead spending it isolated and angry, was him being far worse himself than anyone could ever hope to be to him. And whilst not on the same scale, I've been my own enemy at times. We all have. Being your own enemy can be small things. For instance, staying up late when you've got an early start the next day, or talking negatively about yourself. But it can also be bigger, more extreme things. And I found the best way to stop being your own friend rather than your own enemy is to stop seeing other people as your enemies. As well as putting you in a more positive mindset, it's practice in a way. For some reason, it's so much harder to like ourselves than other people, but if you can find the strength to stop hating people who've wronged you and start being more positive to other people, before you know it, you'll start being more positive to yourself. Your biggest enemy, far more cruel to you than anyone else out there, yourself, will be your ally instead. This has really started happening to me lately, and whilst I've only seen up to where the anime currently is, although Thorfinn still kind of is his own enemy, it seems a lot less so than it was before. And I have a feeling we're going to be seeing him become far more kind to himself as the show progresses. I can't wait to see where this series goes. This definitely won't be the last video on Vinland Saga. But for now, just remember, you have no enemies.